What's the matter with you?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Hey, what up, Film Roast Podcast? I'm Scotty.
And I am Jordan. And welcome to this podcast, this very special episode of the podcast.
With a special guest who we'll introduce in a bit.
Yes. But first, Scotty, what was the answer to your little trivia last week?
I will answer that question with another question. What do Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Ben-Hur, and Titanic have in common?
Do they all have a hugely epic cast and director?
It depends on your point of view.
Come on, Leo was in Titanic. If that's the one that you're going to complain about, then...
That wasn't, actually.
Oh, okay. Ben-Hur, then?
No, not that one either.
Really?
Maybe the backing cast.
Lord of the Rings?
No, the backing cast in Titanic.
Oh, okay.
They're good, but...
They're good, but not great.
I mean, also the...
Billy Zane? Come on, man. Billy freaking Zane.
I like the violins, too. Anyway, no, they've all won 11 Oscars.
Which is that the most that anyone's ever won?
Any individual film has won.
Wow.
That's the most. I think there was one that had a chance at winning. I think La La Land, was it? Had more nominations, so it could have got more. Or was it something else? Anyway.
Possibly. I don't know. Can't remember.
Me neither. So
2017 was the year I kind of tuned out of the Academy Awards.
it was hilarious.
Actually, from 2015 to 2017, I tuned out.
2014, is that 2014, The Artist? So that was the one I hated most. Anyway,
No, that was earlier. That was like 2013.
Oh, yeah.
2012 or something.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Because I remember seeing that in one of our film courses
yes,
that we watched.
for you.
Yeah.
I didn't do that one. Anyway, we'll get to the show. But before we do that, where can they find us, the lovely audience?
Well, if they weren't lazy, they could just pick up Google and do a search there.
That's true.
But if they really want to find us the easy way, then they can go on Spotify, they can go on iTunes, they can go on Stitcher, they can go anywhere really, and just look up our name. It's changed now, by the way. It's the Film Roast Podcast, so you don't need to be like, We Movies, Film Roast Podcast, what the hell? So that's nice and easy and simple.
Yes, the artist formerly known as We Movies.
Yeah.
Film Roast Podcast.
So yeah, get on that. Get on your social media, and because what we've been doing, well, not so much in the last week, but what we've been doing is I like to put up polls every now and then to get people to kind of just interact.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke there about StarCraft, but you know.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go to the show. See you guys soon.
What is mine? Alrighty.
What's up, guys? We are here. I'm Jordan.
I'm Scotty, eating fondue.
Yeah, we have fondue. We've got veggies. We've got cherry tomatoes, and we've got pizza. And we've also got a very special guest with us today. Scotty, do you want to intro him? Or do you want to leave him to intro himself?
Well, he is the wizard of witticisms, but he can introduce himself.
I have a very special guest. I do have autism.
That's how you start, yeah.
And so we've jumped in. Guys, today we're going to be watching Inglorious Bastards. But don't worry, we're not going to be watching it live. We'll go away, we'll record, we'll watch it, and then we'll come back and do the rest of this podcast. But the reason why we wanted to get Mitch on is because, Mitch, you're a bit of a history aficionado, I guess.
In the same sense that the Pacific's a little moist.
Okay, cool. So you're heavily entrenched in...
I was going to say drenched.
history memes and stuff like that.
He's dripping with history memes.
So, because we've been talking to you for a while about wanting to get you on to do some history films, or like just some films that take place in a historical background. And one of the things I've wanted to ask you, or maybe I have, but you've never really given me the answer. What's your favorite history film?
My favourite history film? Oh, that's a good question.
Sprung.
Yes.
I recently watched Gladiator and I quite appreciated it. Although I did have like a second window open as I was watching it, and I was just following along and saying, "Okay, what's historical? What's not?"
So you were debunking the film as you were watching it.
A little bit. I'd have to say that Braveheart is probably the least historical film ever made about William Wallace.
Yes.
How many other films have been made about William Wallace?
There's a couple.
It's a good question.
Most of them are. There's a good. Well, what's the guy's name? Neil Oliver? Is that the guy? Scottish historian who does Scottish history. Go check him out. He does good stuff. But,
Neil who?
Neil Oliver, I think his name is.
Neil Oliver.
I might be completely making it up.
There's some amazing Australian war films. Gallipoli.
Oh, yeah, Gallipoli's great.
Gallipoli is my favourite out of all of the Australian war films, I think. I mean, Hacksaw Ridge is great, but I prefer Gallipoli. I'll take Gallipoli over Hacksaw Ridge.
Okay.
I think, I love Hacksaw Ridge, but it was made by Mel Gibson, and let's be honest, Mel Gibson makes torture porn films.
Yeah, but Mel Gibson was also in Gallipoli.
Yeah, that's true.
But he didn't. He was young then. He didn't have too much influence on the script.
Contrary to popular belief, I don't have anything against Mel Gibson as a filmmaker. I feel like, in the public eye, he's said a lot of things while under the influence that have not been good things to say, or even remotely nice things to say. But I feel like as a filmmaker, there's a voice there that has some merit at least. Like Apocalypto is one of the films that I not enjoy, but I can respect as a solid filmmaking experience.
Despite the fact that it's horrendously historically inaccurate.
Oh yeah. But it's not about being historically accurate, and that's the thing that I've always kind of kept to. When it comes to filmmaking, what is the purpose of the film, and why is the filmmaker trying to tell it? Like, are they telling it to be historically accurate? Because Alexander is a film that was told to be historically accurate, and it is quite historically accurate.
It's mind-bogglingly historically accurate.
But it's a horrible, horrible film.
Yeah, it's just boring as hell.
Yeah, well, not just boring as hell. It's just there's nothing.
There's terrible performances.
It's just horrible. It's just a bad.
I think you can have both though. Like,
yeah.
There's a couple of films I'd like to mention. First off, I've got to make an honourable mention to The Water Diviner, even though it's not a historical film per se. It's a period film.
Yeah.
And it's
Pearl
amazing.
Harbor as well is a stellar piece of historical filmmaking.
I thought it was sci-fi.
No, the best thing about Pearl Harbor was a song that was written about it in Team America.
Yeah, there you go.
Pearl Harbor sucks, and I
will, however, say Longest Day is an amazing film that's just being slept on these days.
Longest Day?
Who made it?
It was made in about the 50s. It's basically about D-Day.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And that one was actually meant to be historically accurate, but it was just meant to showcase the stories of the men who fought.
Okay, cool.
There you go.
So it's got stories of like the guys who paradropped in. It's all in black and white, by the way, too. Guys who paradropped in. The guys on Omaha Beach as well, and how they had to make their way out past the shingle, all of that sort of thing. Just another film that apparently is quite good. To Hell and Back, starring Audie Murphy as Audie Murphy.
Audie Murphy.
Audie Murphy.
Wow.
So Audie Murphy was an American war hero.
This would have been back in like the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
So this was made.
And you'll actually see echoes of Audie Murphy's film in Inglorious Bastards, because you've got obviously you've got the sniper hero who's starring in his own film, and that's actually a reflection of Audie Murphy in To Hell and Back, where he actually plays himself performing the same feats that he did as the guy.
Take that, Errol Flynn.
and just like in Hacksaw Ridge, they had to cut things out of To Hell and Back because it was just inconceivable. The audience wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah. Which is insane because back then, like a lot of films were designed to be unbelievable to have that disconnect between the audience and
the fact that you have to tone things down does make it interesting.
I think Audie Murphy's story, like personal story, is actually a really inspiring one because he suffered pretty bad PTSD.
Oh, okay.
And he drug abuse, alcohol abuse, that sort of stuff. He locked himself in a hotel room for 3 weeks to get clean.
Wow.
Can you imagine suffering all of that and then being asked to fake it again for camera?
That's torture for PTSD.
Yeah, that's insane. That's insane.
I mean, everyone reacts differently to it, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently he had that inner war as well.
As you would.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Full Metal Jacket? Because a lot of people have lauded it as one of the most, not necessarily historically accurate, but emotionally accurate films to war.
I'd pay that.
Particularly
Having said that, the guy who wrote the book, The Short Timers, he actually said that he didn't like Ali Ermey because Ali Ermey was a pogue.
Wow.
He was an REMF, rear echelon MFer.
Yeah.
Like, that was the sort of people that like Gustav Nossal, the guy who wrote The Short Timers, I think that's his name anyway. He actually looked down on those sort of guys because they're all tough and stuff, but they didn't actually see the action.
Just to clarify for the listeners,
yes,
explain what those terms mean that you just said, Mitch.
So, Pogue and REMF are basically the same sort of thing. You're a service person who works behind the lines, and you think you're more important than you are, basically.
Okay.
You act as if you have some sort of authority over guys who actually fight.
There you go.
So George Lucas is a director.
Shots fired. Burn.
So it's actually quite interesting.
But also, no, that's fair.
It's quite interesting that Full Metal Jacket immortalised Ali Ermey as the drill sergeant character. As a matter of fact, he was, you'd all know this, he was originally brought in to teach the drill instructor actor how to be a drill instructor, but Stanley Kubrick, who was a notorious control freak and perfectionist, said, "You have the job and ad-lib everything."
Yeah.
Which is, it's an amazing, amazing thing for Stanley Kubrick to do, and that pretty much solidified his career. Apocalypse Now, but the role that solidified his career was actually a role that he was hated for by the writer of the source material, and it's the supreme irony, really.
Wow.
Well, as you can tell, we've got the right person with us to be watching historical fiction.
Yeah, and on the subject of historical fiction, how do you guys feel about... Because we had this discussion, Scotty and I, we had this discussion at the beginning of the year, where when it comes to biographies, when it comes to telling real life stories...
Because during the Oscar period, there was a lot of them.
There was a lot of them last year. Should filmmakers be able to have more of a creative say in how a story unfolds, or should they tell it beat for beat exactly how it was?
Because I've seen both sides of this argument. In fact, it came up, there was a film that came out late last year, wasn't a very well-known film, about, in it there's a character who's based on a real actress who's interviewed, and she says things in the movie that are exact opposites of her own belief for the purposes of the fiction. The actress took the film to court and lost. And a lot of people are like, actually, normally I'd be on the side of the film, but it was some massive issue. It might be an abortion or something. But she had, I can't remember exactly what the issue was, might not be abortion. But her views were the exact opposite of what was portrayed in the movie, and she didn't like that. And most people are like, yeah, actually, that's a reasonable thing to do. Is if they're saying the exact opposite of your views, then maybe you should be able to, but the film actually won. So
because it's based on a true story.
Well, but not just that, but on the grounds of being fiction. Because it's based on something like that, there are I'm guessing, because I don't know for sure, that there are workarounds to not getting sued in terms of that kind of stuff. Whereas, I mean, if it's a defamation case and somebody was asked in a media report, what do you think of this person? And they said, I think he's a shithead, or I think this person's this, or I think this person's that. Then they could get sued, definitely for defamation. But because it's in a film, it's a harder thing to kind of gauge.
One thing I'd actually like to see, we talk about, what should come first, the storytelling or the facts. One thing, and so this is something I think's been talked about a lot. There's a growing genre of white man biopics. And there's some amazing stories out there, like Joe Medicine Crow. You guys have heard of him, right? He was the last Crow war chief, Native American Crow tribe war chief. Because when he went to World War II, there are 4 things you've got to do in order to be a war chief.
Okay.
You've got, and let's see if I can remember this. You've got to touch a man without killing him. You've got to take a man's weapon. You've got to steal a guy's horse, and you've got to do one more thing. And in the course of Joe Medicine Crow's career in World War II, he actually did all of these things. And I would love to see a movie on this because not only does it showcase stories that haven't been told among indigenous peoples, among minorities. It's just an amazing story. This is one of the things I have with Hollywood. There's almost this diversity for diversity's sake.
Yes,
like we've got to fit it in.
Story.
There are some amazing stories that need to be told.
One of the coolest stories that came out 4 years ago is Studio Ghibli did the story of the guy who designed the Zero plane.
Yeah,
and when that film came out, there was a lot of controversy because it's like, these are the bad guys. Why are we celebrating some guy who served the bad guys? But his story is cool.
Yeah,
and what's wrong with
interesting story?
Interesting story.
Another one that reminded me of is Green Book. Now, Green Book is written by a white American who is the son of one of the main characters in this book. But it's trying to tell a story that is racially relevant, but through the eyes of white America. And it doesn't work.
It does for the white Americans.
Well, even for white America, I don't think it works.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard the movie wasn't all that good.
It's not great.
And the performances are really what make the movie.
The
contrast
is fantastic.
Contrast this though to Clint Eastwood, who does Flakes of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, those companion films. My dad
one after the other.
Yeah.
Fantastic film series.
Both of them.
Also, what was the most recent one where he actually stands up, where Clint Eastwood's character stands up for the Hmong immigrants against the gangsters?
The Gran Torino.
Gran Torino. Yeah, that's it.
Movie.
Also a fantastic film.
But The Mule wasn't.
Yeah, The Mule was awful.
The Mule was excuses for him to have threesomes on screen.
And also for him to be a racist prick.
Yeah, to say anything he wants with it and get away with it.
Yeah. It was too white American.
It was too on the nose.
Yeah.
Which is so weird because he's shown that he can do really sensitive.
To be honest, though, he wrote those other films. Well, at least in part, he helped write those other films. What was it called? The
Mule.
The Mule. Yeah, he didn't write that. Someone else wrote that.
Right. Okay. So you can tell he clearly has a heart for those whose stories aren't being told.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to see more of that. As opposed to, the Ghostbuster reboots of the world and the...
Gosh.
I mean, he really does embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly in humanity.
Get out. Get out. Get out right now. That's horrible. The movie isn't, though. Get Out. Get Out's really good.
I've heard
Speaking of racial diversity in film, Get Out is fantastic.
Didn't Jordan Peele just come up with a new film as well?
Us.
Yes. Us, that's it.
That came out beginning of this year, which is also an amazing film.
I think Get Out's...
He's a really talented
I do agree. I think Get Out is his... Because it's seminal, it's his first kind of big on-screen outing, and it's fantastic.
Has the Twilight Zone come out yet?
Yes, it has.
Okay. He's narrating that too, isn't he?
Yeah, he's writing it. He's adapted it, I guess, from what it was to what it is now. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're in Australia, so you have to pay a lot of money to see it. And I have not paid any money to see it. I haven't watched it yet, but I'd like to at some point.
Actually, can I say, while we're talking about films that got a limited release, historical film I really appreciated that we actually went and saw together.
Yes.
Death of Stalin.
Death of Stalin is amazing. I didn't see it with you guys, but yes, I have seen and loved Death of Stalin when I've seen it. That's another one we could probably do on the podcast, actually, because it is a really good movie.
It is. Fantastic satire and also quite relevant to today's political...
And devastatingly true.
Yeah. Because it was a graphic novel first.
Which I have, by the way.
And I believe it transferred into being it was like an off-Broadway play at some point, and then it became a film. Fantastic film.
It is.
Fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out.
And then one of the great things about the best historical movies, in my opinion, is you get interested in the source material. If there's one thing that was good about Vikings, is people then were interested in Vikings history, even though the show was shocking.
Well, it's made by History Channel.
Yeah.
Which is really odd.
Aliens Channel.
Yeah. I saw a meme recently that was History Channel on the daytime. Penguins live in the Arctic and they flourish in groups of over 100 of their species, and then History Channel at night, aliens created the penguins. And
Speaking of penguins, disturbing fact I learned today. Some penguins engage in prostitution in exchange for rocks for their nest.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So
well
it's not human specific.
We've covered a lot in the first couple of minutes of this podcast.
Yes. Remember to follow us on Podbean
and Stitcher and
SoundCloud, YouTube,
iTunes, all that stuff.
Mitch's Facebook.
Go taunt him.
Yes.
Send him left-wing memes. He loves those.
The left can't meme. Neither can the right. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Scotty, did you have the answer from last week's?
I'm sending you secret messages right now, asking if you remember what it was. So, the answer might be no to that. Maybe we'll tell it in the outro. We'll be back with the trivia at the end.
All right. Well, guys, sit back and we'll get into this podcast.
Yep.
Waking, putting out the fire with gasoline.
Well, it's pretty good. I think that's...
Born to be mild.
Is that your theme song, Mitch?
It is.
Alright, that should be.
Born to be mild?
Born to be mild.
Yeah, that's good.
Recording. Yeah, we're recording. Alright, cool.
I'm trying to think what my theme song would be. It would be a song by the Cranberries. Zombie. I don't know.
In your head, in your head.
I like to think that my theme would be written by John Williams. No, I was thinking more. And just go on and on forever.
Yeah. Like you'd be like the 24 YouTube video version of that.
Yeah, exactly.
My theme is either Hymn of the Cherubim by Tchaikovsky or Agnus Dei by Samuel Barber.
Actually, you know what? I'd love to just have the playlist of my life collated by either Quentin Tarantino or the Coen Brothers.
Okay.
What about the guy who did? Was it James Gunn who did the soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would work for you.
Yeah.
80s music. You do like your 80s music.
I love 80s music. I love just 80s. The vibe of the 80s. That's why I redesigned our podcast logo.
Yes, the Film Roast podcast logo.
If you want to do an 80s thing, I know a guy that would actually be good, Mitchell Hall. He's an absolute 80s buff. Like, he lives it. If he could start as soon as 1989 finished, if he could start it again at 1980, he would.
I feel like my love of the 80s comes from the 80s to me being something that is so... It's almost like another world, really. It's almost mythic in what it contained and the stories that come out of it. You know what I mean?
The myths of the 80s. The 80s that you've been lived and breathed.
Yeah.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah. Through the... Or like just the Steven Spielberg glasses that have been put over the eyes of society. Like, I mean, Jaws... E.T. is another one.
Seminal films.
Like,
Ron Howard films too.
Yeah.
Robert Zemeckis.
And all of these, especially Robert Zemeckis. I mean, he almost single-handedly iconified the 80s with Back to the Future. Like, it's crazy. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of the love for the 80s comes from, is because a lot of influential creative people out there loved that time so much, they focus on the best of it, and so it filters to us as seeing a lot of the best of it. Because I honestly can't think of much. Like, obviously there is, but I can't think of much off the top of my head that you would be like, oh, well, it's like something akin to the Twin Towers terrorist attack, or like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, there's nothing huge drawing it. Like,
no negatives, you mean? There's nothing terrible in the 80s. Okay, I was like wondering, what's he
unless you think Reagan was a bad idea.
Well, I don't know the man to begin with, so all I know is what I've heard.
Was he an American president that got assassinated or not? That's the question.
Oh no, there was an attempt on his life.
That's right.
Yeah, there was an attempt. But I'm pretty sure almost every American president up until the early 2000s had an attempt made on their life.
Yeah, like it's weird that Bush, Obama, and Trump all haven't had assassination
that
attempts.
we know of. That's the other thing.
Yeah, that we know of.
Yeah, that's true.
So I feel like I reckon there's definitely people out there trying to plan these things.
Yeah.
Like, there would, with the amount of people in the world.
Damn it, you're on to me, Jordan.
I'm saying I'm recording right now.
Like, I mean, take for example Bush. Like the vitriol and hatred against Bush for like starting the Iraq War. Like I grew up on Michael Moore books. Like, you know, I hated Bush as much as anyone.
Yeah,
but there was no thought that anyone would actually assassinate him for it.
I think everyone felt sorry for him deep down.
Yeah.
No, there's a theory that he was actually drunk. Like he was actually turning to alcohol to cope with the stress of presidency.
Yeah. Sure, wouldn't be surprised.
Well,
but the thing is, I also think that there's a level of, well, there was. I'm not sure about it anymore. But society is in like that pendulum swing. So before Bush, I think we're in the almost uncontrolled, violent stage of reacting to things a lot of the time, especially in the States. America was quite vitriolic in terms of its violence.
I mean,
and even though there is still violence, obviously, there was a stage of like 15. Well, it was dying down. I think it is coming back now. We're seeing a lot more. A lot more horrific attacks being committed in churches, in mosques, in all of that kind of stuff. And yes, violence has
Walmarts
been going on for
Black Fridays,
centuries. But at the same time, like it's in that pendulum thing, and I think we're swinging back towards the ultra-violent side of things.
I'm inclined to agree with you, because like we've lived in the most peaceful period of world history for the last 70, 80 years. Like, I mean, sure, there's been wars and stuff, but we haven't had a world war.
I think the peak of that peacefulness was the last 20. I feel like the last 20 years it's gotten to the most peaceful, and then recently in the last 5-10 years it's started to get more and more aggressive again.
So you mean since the Iraq War ended?
I mean...
No, just before, I reckon.
I mean, there's a book I read a while ago called Merchant Soldier Sage, and it's a book that argues historically that society is run by one of three castes. Obviously, you've got four castes. You've got the workers on the bottom, like the serfs, the peasants, the working class, whatever you want to call them, whatever history there was. But you've got three different castes.
I didn't vote for him.
You've got the merchants who are traders, economists, bankers, that sort of stuff. The people who organise the finances of the country. The burghers, the bourgeoisie.
Burgers.
You've got you've got soldiers, so that's like nobles, knights, generals, all of that.
The
sort
people
of
who
thing.
keep the state safe.
And then you've got sages, which is either your technocrats, like scientists, your religious people, your bureaucrats, that sort of thing.
People who were wise and had knowledge.
And the scum of the earth. I mean, politicians.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Politicians be broadly in the sage camp.
Yeah.
Because they're a function of the bureaucracy more than they're a function of... Although, let's be honest, there's a lot of overlap between the merchant and the sage class in Australian politics and American politics.
Well, we're going down the rabbit hole, guys.
I mean, in politics in general, but I think it is important. In politics in general, I think it's become way more about the entertainment value than about anything else.
But here's the other thing too. After World War II, we completely eliminated the soldiers from any kind of leadership position.
Not after World War II.
Well,
the Vietnam War, the Korean War, that they were quite... I think Korean War kind of almost spelled the death of it.
Yeah.
But they... And there was also the Cold War as well.
MacArthur, was sort of the death of it.
Yeah, MacArthur invaded China, and I think that's when everyone said, let's just stop trusting generals now.
Yeah.
And now the war hawks are like Bolton. He's not a soldier. Like Mattis was like Mad Dog Mattis, and everyone was like... And he said, I don't want to go to war. Buy a whole lot of ammunition so that I don't have to use it. Peace through strength sort of thing. Like, we need a strong military. So
that was sort of the Cold War in a nutshell.
That was the Cold War.
So, like...
Beginning of the Cold War.
Once we actually got rid of people like MacArthur was basically the last big general, the last soldier.
Warlord, might be the term.
But it's interesting that, and I think that's why we've had this massive period of peace, because the sages and the merchants have pretty much ruled society for the last little while.
The scientists and the I don't want to say religious people, because I feel like that's not the case at all. But
no, it's like bureaucrats.
Yeah.
Bureaucrats. And now the bureaucrats are taking more because they put more questions on the scientists.
Well,
it's that whole thing.
Is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding
It's
bureaucracy.
that whole thing from the Dark Knight. You either die a hero, or you see yourself, or you
live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
But if you kill just one little mayor, everybody goes crazy.
But yeah, so we've had this period of peace, and I think you're right. We are going we have no outlet for our violence. Like every human being has what Freud calls, your ego, which I love myself.
Your id and your ego.
Your id, your ego, your superego, your conscience. You've also got your eros and your thanatos instincts. Your eros is your instinct to love and to make love and to create, and your thanatos is your instinct to destroy and to destroy yourself. And I think because we've demonized the Thanatos instinct so much, we've bought into this myth of we can always keep prospering, society's going onwards and upwards. We've neglected the fact that there are very real cycles that, are shown in the economic cycle, how we get depressions every 50 years.
I think the world has fallen out of love with that cycle. Probably been out of love with it for about 10 years now. The more I see, especially with internet culture, I think the introduction of the internet culture has really allowed our destructive side to grow more. If
or
that
it's
sense.
it's provided an outreach for it. That's what it's done. An outreach that also that like minds.
It's cultivated.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cultivated it, and it's allowed it to
on every side, like militant commies, militant white supremacists,
and we jumped to the conclusion that the other side is combative. No matter which side you're on,
because we're combative, therefore they must be combative.
And also,
it's projecting
online. It creates this barrier of neglect where you completely ignore that the other side could be human in any shape or form. It's just a name or it's just a photo on a screen.
Well, they don't matter because they are they. What matters is that you have built up feelings and you want to project them onto something.
Well,
it doesn't matter what the ideal is.
You are right and nobody else is right, so therefore everyone else is wrong and everyone else isn't a human being. They're all just numbers on a screen.
And when you're right and no one can tell you that you're wrong, then you can justify the most heinous things because the ends justify, If you're right, everything you do is right and no one can tell you otherwise.
Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
one of the things. Cambridge Analytica is so distended from people that it just treated them like numbers.
Or you can strangle Diane Kruger and then betray the Third Reich anyway.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
We're going to talk about Inglorious Bastards, guys.
Inglorious Bastards? What movie is that? I've never heard of that movie before.
You know how long?
Tarantino what?
Do you know how long I was trying to get that segue in there?
I know, and I was glad that I kept it going because I think a lot of this is relevant.
Oh, it definitely is. I don't know if we'll work it into the cast, but
I'm pushing it. Like, I'm leaving all of that into the podcast.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because it's just it's Quentin Tarantino films have this almost obsession with violence.
Well, it's beyond obsession. It's a relationship.
It's
a reverence,
a symbiosis.
Or like a religion of violence. Really, like
ritual.
It's very ritualistic. It's very over the top a lot of the time.
There's certain things that are, you can. I know you said we wouldn't do it. Making jokes about Quentin Tarantino's foot fetish.
I think he has a violence fetish more than he has a foot fetish. If we're going to go down that line, just because if you take a look at his earlier films, like Reservoir Dogs, like Pulp Fiction, those two films especially are where Quentin Tarantino is at his most violent in terms of actually showing it on the screen.
Yeah. And
as
that's the reason why I haven't watched Reservoir Dogs yet, because I don't want to interact with that kind of violence.
But the thing is about
it's a really good film, though. You should.
The thing with Reservoir Dogs is the camera, it knows the audience.
Yes.
So it moves away from the violence. It's there. It's on screen, but you don't see it.
Yeah. The implication of the violence is very, very strong, and I feel like that was less of the reason for in Reservoir Dogs. And it was more because of budget reasons why he didn't show a lot of the gore. Because that was one of his first big films. It was a film that is probably one of his most indie productions.
Well, it's only an hour and 40 minutes long compared to this 2.5 hours of Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah. But the longer he goes on, I feel like the better he becomes at being more restrained. See, in Inglorious Bastards, we see a fair amount of violence in the first 3/4 of the film, but most of it is from far away, or it's extreme close up and not on the event of.
Or it's a quick to and a quick away, like with the scalping scenes. It's not long and it's not dragged across concrete. It's there and it's off again. It's there and it's off again.
Just reminding you that this exists.
Yeah.
But at the very end of the film, we get a lot more close-ups to, like when Hans Lander is lying there, getting the Nazi symbol engraved into his skull. It's there. It's right there.
But the other thing with this is all these violence scenes are connected to close-ups with characters' faces as well. So we see people's reactions to the violence constantly.
And in a sense, it humanises, the violence. Like it's happening to real people.
Yeah, and it's being done by real people.
Which, speaking about dehumanization earlier, like to what extent is this movie showcasing dehumanization inherent in propaganda?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, have you seen many propaganda films? Because I know I haven't. I haven't seen many.
Well, in one sense, The Longest Day could be considered a propaganda film, although it didn't necessarily dehumanize. It just sought to tell the stories of good people.
Yeah.
Like, heroes, that sort of thing.
Yeah. The heroic nature.
Well, we saw that Daffy Duck one.
Yeah, well, I know the tropes of propaganda films. It's always talking up whatever perspective that they're trying to do. It's always also trying to layer a lot of that perspective with positive attributes and also demonizing the enemy to a point where they don't seem human. And it's quite... And it's quite frightening because recently I've seen films that could classify as propaganda films.
No, there's definitely propaganda.
Namely, the what is it called? The Angel Has the Fallen series.
Oh
with
yeah,
Gerard Butler.
yeah.
Like they are so they're propaganda.
But the
movies.
thing is,
that's what they are.
The thing is with them is
they're American.
They're playing on old B movies, which were all in the 70s and 80s. There were a lot of B movies that were just propaganda films. And
but I don't think they're aware of it.
Maybe not.
I don't think they're aware of it.
I mean, let's take into account also, what other propaganda can we talk about? Propaganda is anything that is black and white. You don't have to think about it. You just have to uncritically accept opinions that are being given to you.
Well,
kill your family. Kill your family.
Personally,
hey, leave it for the subliminal messages.
Yeah. Okay.
You gotta be smart about this, Scotty. I personally think that most of the Transformer films are propaganda movies.
Yeah, no, I'd say that.
They're like propaganda to white
toxic
jughead America. Yeah, toxic masculinity, the movie.
Oh, look how great the armed forces are, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, in less of a way, but also just as important, the Fast and Furious movies are also propaganda, in my opinion.
You're going to have to explain that one for me.
Well, they do recently. They have been falling more in line with the toxic masculinity idea of what a male needs to be.
I get that.
And what a male needs
and what
to
a family
do,
is.
And what a unconventional family has to be. And it has parameters that say, this is what is important or what should be important. And it really kind of just...
You might be stretching a little bit, but yeah.
Well, that's what I said to a lesser extent. Yeah. But there has, with the most recent spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw, that was just...
Well, it was just a bad movie.
It was a bad movie, but it did... there was a lot of toxic masculinity throughout that film that I was like...
to its credit,
like that.
A lot of Islanders really appreciated seeing their culture represented in a big-budget film for one of the first times.
Yeah, it's just the problem was in the second half of the movie. If it was in the first half, it would be a bit better.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I was expecting them to have this amazing feast and this family built around the culture. I did not see almost any of the culture.
No, they just it was there and it was gone. It was never really appreciated.
I guess it's something they can work on in Hollywood. I mean, we're slowly getting there with films like Crazy Rich Asians, really popular with people.
Moana
it didn't feature a non-Asian in any significant role because it's a film made by Asians to showcase the Asian experience.
It was a very...
And eventually we'll get there with...
welcoming film. Crazy Rich Asians was incredibly welcoming for its culture.
Both the stars of that movie are now in other movies.
Yes.
The male lead is now... He's going to be in a romantic comedy at the end of the year with Emilia Clarke. And
the
female...
Christmas... story, something like that.
And then the whatever her name, Constance Wu. She's going to be in something as well.
She's going to be in the stripper movie.
The Hustlers.
Yeah, Hustlers. She's in
okay.
Hustlers. Yeah.
And then Awkwafina's in.
She's in an Academy Award. I reckon that's going to be nominated for.
You know what's hilarious? I heard the words Jennifer Lopez Academy Award nominee ?
Wow.
For Hustlers.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting because I saw the trailer for that and I was like,
it could but as you said,
it
could be.
But then again, I am adverse to what people class as successful marketing these days. So, what am I?
Apparently it's a cross between Magic Mike and Wall Street.
Yeah.
So,
then.
Yeah.
So it could actually be good.
But the stripper's a female. It's okay, Mitch.
That doesn't make me feel any better.
What are these round things on their chests? Why do they have them? Take them away! They're disturbing me!
Why do they have nipples?
Welcome to the podcast, Mitch.
Great. I feel very welcome.
Let's get back on track and talk about Inglorious Bastards.
You know who, funnily enough, is sort of a case of masculinity done right? Is Christoph Waltz's character, Hans Lander.
Yeah. Really, though?
Please continue.
Yeah, explain that one for us.
He has control of the situation, but never in a... Well, it is an evil way. But it's not... but it's not a... it's not hyping up his masculine attributes.
No, because he's it's not a conscious decision. I don't believe. I think he's just got so much confidence in his own intelligence.
Yes,
that he doesn't.
That's my point. That's his skill set.
He's the alpha Buddha, basically.
Yeah, he's an alpha Buddha. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Like he just does whatever the hell he likes because he can.
But he uses intellect to be the most powerful person in the scene. It's
Rather
not his strength.
Yeah.
There's ego there. Certainly there's a lot of ego there.
But ego's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, exactly.
As long as it doesn't cause you to be selfish in terms of other people.
No. But I think he's the best place to start when we're talking about the movie, though, because...
I mean, we start with one of the best, in my opinion, one of the... If I ever had a top 100 of best film scenes, I think the opening scene for this movie would be in the top 10 at least.
And it's a fairy tale opening. It's a Western opening. It's
if you know Quentin Tarantino's work, you know that he is in love with Western film making techniques, but not just that. With Japanese filmmaking techniques, but not just that. But also...
those are the same thing sometimes.
And like the blaxploitation films of the 60s, 70s and 80s.
Well, that comes into like Pulp Fiction and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, almost all of his films have elements of that. And Django Unchained is a massive one. And he deals with a lot of stuff that he himself witnessed as a child. And so when he was a kid, I remember him doing an interview with Jamie Foxx, and Jamie was asking him about just his upbringing and stuff. And he said, well, I grew up in a home with a single mother who would date a lot of different black men. And when he was home alone, and if they ever came around, they would actually want to connect with him. So what they would do is they'd take him to the movies, and he'd see their films, their favorite movies that were in the cinema, and they were always the exploitative action films, like Shaft, and you know all these different kinds of
the movies you haven't
kind
seen.
of cultural tentpoles for these
there's
people.
movies you haven't seen, but you've seen posters for these movies.
Yeah.
And so because of that upbringing, he felt like he was welcomed into a culture that he wasn't born into. Which is interesting. Like, I find that incredibly...
I think it's a nice way to get introduced to a culture as well, is through their cinema. Like, I feel like when we watched Roma, I felt like we were introduced to a bit of Mexican culture through it, but also through...
In spite of the fact that most Mexicans hated that movie.
Well...
Which is odd.
Speaking of different cultures, I can highly recommend French films. I really enjoy French films.
I thought for a second you were saying fridge films, and I was...
I just stick the camera in front of the French. It's a new avant-garde style of filmmaking.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that.
Watch as the mold doesn't grow because your fridge works correctly.
And French films are also like some of the pinnacle of simple art. I feel like in terms of and I was going to say the artist and piss Scotty off.
Why so glad, Scott?
But it's it's a lot of their filmmaking techniques and style are extremely. Simple doesn't really.
No, there's actually a lot of character. Character might be the right term. In fact, Tarantino does it the same way. Is that there are details in the scene that are exquisitely and gracefully done that are naturally entertaining to watch, even though they're not necessarily important.
They add to the colour of it.
Yeah, exactly. Colourful, characterful.
Yeah.
I like French movies as well. Just not any scumbag movie you may have mentioned a second ago. You know what? We saw this. We streamed this movie, and I've written it right at the top of the.
And I brought it all the way from home down here.
Well, if we get the Xbox One working, anyway, streaming versus Blu-ray, because I thought it was okay, but there were a few times where I feel like it did suffer a bit from us watching it by streaming instead of Blu-ray. But
why? What would?
I felt like so there's this thing sometimes when the quality's not the greatest, where they feel like. What are they called? Those old kaleidoscope things used to put in your eyes, and they swap through old movies.
Oh yeah.
I think those old 80s toys.
The slide clickers.
The slide clicker things.
I got one from McDonald's that was like a Lion King one.
Okay, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I feel like sometimes
back when McDonald's had
one of them.
good presents in their Happy Meals.
Yeah. Oh, they have They
they don't. They have
Pokemon cards a year ago.
What? When?
A year ago, they had Pokemon cards.
Why didn't you tell me that?
Well, because I only found out about it at the time. And sometimes they have Coca-Cola glasses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad has a complete set of Coca-Cola glasses. I'm not sure how to feel about that.
Anyway, there's a scene right at the start where Hans Lander shakes hands with the French, and in the background there's fog descending over the tranquil environment. And that just sums up what's about to happen. Every single shot in that sequence is important to telling the story as well as what's happening in it.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something that Tarantino has been very underrated with in terms of his critics and his peers, is his ability to tell a story through visuals, but also his strength in his dialogue. A lot of people that I have witnessed online, a lot of, I'm going to say, wannabe film directors who have never made it, who have never really made a film, or have made short films and then given up, do not like Quentin Tarantino and feel that he is a hack.
It's just weird, isn't it?
It's just odd. I understand sort of where they're coming from, because when he did make Pulp Fiction, there was another writer that went uncredited that wrote whole scenes in that movie. Whole scenes. And he went completely uncredited at the behest of the studio, who wanted to fashion Quentin into one of their golden age directors. So a director who had their own name, who they could market as a name director.
This is while he's working for a certain company called the Weinsteins.
Yeah, well, up until this point, he was still working for the Weinsteins when he made Inglorious Bastards.
And there's at the start of his latest movie, there's a little joke about that.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So it's really, where does it really, like, how can you gauge what a good director / writer is in a collaborative universe that is filmmaking?
I don't see the point in asking that question, because you don't look and go, why is this good? You look, well, you do. You go, this is good because. You don't go looking for the answers. You just see what the answers give you. If that makes sense.
I think yes and no.
Okay, so for example, with Tarantino, there in his dialogue, there is his dialogue, and then there's a conversation that's happening beneath the scene, which is also very clear to see.
Yes. Well, a great example in this is when Hans is talking about how he's speaking in French, and he's saying, look, I have exhausted, I feel that I've exhausted all of my ability to speak the French language. I would like to ask you if I can switch to English, if you're comfortable with that, because this is your house, I will abide by your rules.
But he's doing that
all in perfect French, of course.
Exactly.
All in perfect French. It tells us, the audience, that, he is fluent in French, and he's not uncomfortable speaking French. There's another reason why he wants to switch, and it's fairly obvious to us, the audience, why that is.
Well, it might not be at
interestingly
that point,
enough, in the German dub, he switches to German.
Well, yeah, of course, because it would be German dub.
Yeah.
But yeah, he uses, as a character, as a writer, he uses the language barriers of these characters to actually tell a story. Because later on, when Shoshana is in, she's talking with Germans who are speaking French, and whenever they switch to German, suddenly we don't get access to the subtitles anymore. We don't understand what they're actually saying, because we're seeing the world through her perspective. And that is one thing that Quentin Tarantino does really well, is he knows his characters when he writes them.
Well, he knows how to show us, the audience, their eyes as well.
Yeah.
Well, Mitch.
Yes.
We brought you here to talk about history.
Yeah.
Is there anything particularly historic that you'd like to comment on?
Well,
or unhistoric, if you like to comment on that.
Well, I'd actually like to... Well, in terms of history, I wouldn't necessarily call this a historical movie. I mean, aside from the fact that, spoiler alert, they kill Hitler.
Yeah.
Hitler's in this movie?
They may change
it. But part of it, it's not a movie about World War II. It's actually a movie about propaganda films.
Yeah.
And because obviously everyone knows that Tarantino doesn't make movies about stuff. He makes movies about making movies. So this is a movie about propaganda films. And I just find it really interesting, the juxtaposition between, you've got the audience laughing and joking when Frederick Zoller is gunning down Allied soldiers at improbable speed. Like, I just want to point it out. You know, the rifle he's using is a bolt action, and he's firing it semi-automatic, and you see a different guy go down every time. So, like, it's clear. Like, you might also call it a bit of a, you know, throwback to your 80s films a little bit, you know, your 80s action films where they just don't reload.
Yeah.
Oh, there was 40 rounds in that 30-round magazine.
Well, you know what? I think that was also something that came out of propaganda films.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Well, actually, they do it in this movie. The Hugo Stiglitz backstory that comes out of nowhere. That's just like that's like a propaganda hit. It's hit. You read it in the paper. Oh, why is this in the paper? Why is this interesting story? It's this propaganda.
Yeah,
and like we're looking at this film, Stolz der Nation, and we're saying, oh, you know, how bad is it that they're celebrating this man who did all of this, and but we've all
look, Hitler's dying, yay!
Yeah, and
kill Hitler,
and you've
shoot his fucking face off.
You've just got Eli Roth emptying magazine after magazine into Hitler's face until it becomes a fine paste.
In the same
and
shot.
we're supposed to enjoy that. Yeah.
But that's insane. I don't think we are supposed to enjoy it.
I think
unfortunately we do enjoy it.
I think we are.
No, because look, if you look at the cutaways back to Eli Roth's face,
they're identical to the ones from the thing.
He's not happy. He's not happy doing this.
He's intense.
He's angry. He's upset. He's not. The look on his face isn't something like he's not laughing or smiling or anything like that. He's not manic. He's just really upset.
But it's catharsis. That's what it is. It's not necessarily.
I think it is. I think he's trying to achieve catharsis. I don't think he's getting it.
I mean, there's
the look on his face tells me he's not getting it.
There's a Confucian saying: if you go on a journey of revenge, be prepared to dig 2 graves, and you definitely see that in this. You all owe me 100 Nazi scalps, or you will die trying, sort of thing. And you see them basically all die trying.
Yeah.
Like,
except for him and the little man.
That's what they call me.
But that's every single character that intensely goes after revenge in this film gets killed.
Well, nobody gets what they want in this film exactly the way I want it.
No, exactly.
Oh, except for maybe
Aldo Rain.
Aldo Rain.
Yeah.
Aldo is the only one that gets what he wants.
Yeah.
And the look of fear on Hans's face.
And that scene is great.
When he finds out that there's nothing that's going to stop him from carving that sign into his skull is just, it's almost heartbreaking in a way, because you followed this character, and even though he's done horrible things, you kind of like him.
Exactly, he's extremely likable.
He is a very charming person.
And I love the performance that he gives in this film. Christoph Waltz is insanely underrated as an actor, and I want to see more of his.
Well, I want to see him more do his strengths, and I'm really down terrifyingly funny here, because that's
Well, let's actually talk about that in this movie. I'd actually suggest that Christoph Waltz, Hans Landa, the Nazi character, is actually the most human character in that film.
Well, Diane Kruger's character is as well.
I would disagree.
Yeah,
I would disagree. One of the things
I think she's an accessory to the plot, nothing more.
Okay.
No, I think she's still a character, but I think the reason why I don't believe that she is a good character or a likable character.
I said a human character.
Well, even less so of a human character. She seems... And I'm just going off my instincts watching it again. I think this is like maybe the 8th or 9th time I've seen this film. But the reason why Hans kills her is because, funnily enough, she's a traitor.
Yeah.
And that's why he gets really upset at the very end when Aldo shoots
his radio man,
because that wasn't part of the deal.
No.
He negotiated for that man's life. You made a deal. You have to stick to it. So it's interesting because it's one of those things that, like, he believes that the rules don't apply to anyone else, much like a real human being.
Yeah.
Your circumstances are like, no, well, yeah, he may have done it, but I can still do it. That doesn't make me as bad as him. And it's really interesting character.
Let's also talk about, the Nazi... I mean, not even Nazi. He was just a Wehrmacht, Obersturmführer.
Explain.
Wilhelm The guy who was just celebrating his son's first birthday.
Yeah,
yes.
He is also I would suggest, the next most human character in the film.
Yeah.
You know, I find it really interesting that this is a send-up of propaganda films in that you don't actually feel any kind of kinship with any of the... You know, you've got Hugo Stiglitz, who gets that massive guitar riff intro. You've got the Bear Jew, who gets... You know,
they're all collectible trading cards.
They're soldiers.
Human beings. They're not...
They're soldiers.
Yeah.
Most of them are soldiers. So, you're talking about Wilhelm. Even though he's a soldier, you're connecting to him because he's just been married. He's the human traits.
Yeah.
Our main character is Shoshana. She's not a soldier. She's a cinema owner.
Yeah.
You connect to her...
but we connect with her because her family has died.
Yes, that's true.
Her family has been killed.
But also you connect with her because of the scene where you meet Hans Lander again.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, to a point, because we meet her well and truly before we see Hans Lander again.
Yeah, but I think that scene with the strudel scene...
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm not denying that it's not fantastic, but we already get a feel for her as a character before that.
I would suggest actually she's more human than Wilhelm, but I think Wilhelm is a great example. Like, I just find it interesting that the Americans aren't the heroes.
Oh, no. And the British aren't either.
No.
The three British characters you get in this are all caricatures.
They are. Absolutely they are.
And they're fantastic because they're like, it's basically James Bond. Like, it really is. James Bond if he was a failure.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic that was the story. That the balance in this film is really good.
Yeah.
Because we could have gotten a war film that's a version of Love Actually, where every character gets the right amount of screen time and every character has an equal amount of plot and every character has an equal kind of almost hierarchy. They're all up here. The stakes are all up here.
Well, they also have the
plot
plot's the same amount. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and everything is kind of like, okay, but this is clearly directed as a film for Hans Lander and most of the characters that he comes in contact with.
Yeah,
I feel like he's
sort of the driving force. Of the movie.
Yeah. He's the hurricane that everyone's trying to clean up in the wake of.
He's almost the bomb under the table.
He is. He actually reminds me of. I don't know if you've ever met a person like this where whenever they say something, you're not sure whether to laugh or keep your mouth shut because you're not sure how they're going to react. Where you're just like, no, not you. I know how you're going to react. That's how I play you like a fiddle. No, but like someone who's like you're just waiting for their reaction because you're not sure about which way is this going to go. Like you say a joke and you're like, he's not laughing, and then he laughs, and then oh, thank God, I'm not in any trouble. Like that's the kind of person that he seems to be, and I know at least two people that I know at work who are like that, where you're just not sure how they're going to react to stuff.
In this movie, there are a lot of references to movies.
Yes.
Naturally for a
Tarantino. In the dialogue and out of the dialogue.
Yep.
Whether it be The Great Escape or even Downfall or...
Sound of Music.
Yes. Anything that really revolves around Nazis has some reference in this. I'm sure there's Indiana Jones references in there too.
Yeah.
But the amount of dialogue talking about all this war propaganda movies, I'm like, do either of you actually know about any of them? Because I don't, but I just assume that Tarantino's talking about real ones.
Yeah. There was one, the actress that Goebbels mentions. Like, I don't want to hear her name again. I believe she was an actress that primarily worked in the 30s and 20s before World War II started.
Okay.
And I'm not certain. I'm not entirely certain because I only did a brief amount of research on this. But it seemed like she abstained from a lot of the films that were being made during World War II.
She also smuggled out a whole lot of Jews.
There you go.
Okay. Well, that would make you unpopular with Nazis, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. So yeah, there you go. Wow. That kind of explains her story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's propaganda is so rampant in this movie, and it's really interesting to see how Quentin uses the propaganda from the Nazi film that they're showing at the cinema, and then also almost doing shot for shot similar things with when they're gunning down all of the Nazi high command in the cinema itself.
Mm-hmm. And to what I'm always going to go back to the question: to what extent does us as the audience laughing and joking along with the movie we're watching mirror the audience of the film within a film, their experience?
I think it does depend on how conscious we are as an audience of it. But there's even more moments. The fact that they put the Nazi symbol onto the German soldiers is a reflection of the Jewish star that the Jews were forced to wear. Everything that they do is sort of a dark reflection of what Nazis actually did.
And even the whole thing where they're destroying this the cinema, this temple of Nazi worship from the inside out is reminiscent of the Samson story in the Bible.
Yeah,
this is what you mentioned earlier before we started recording. And there's a lot of different Jewish ideologies at play in this film.
And it's very interesting when you look at the Samson story itself. Is it supposed to be a triumph or is it supposed to be a warning? You know, how much more could God have used Samson if he had been faithful? You know, to what extent is the story of Samson not so much a story of triumph, but a story of warning? You know, this is what happens when you know.
Well, it's that whole thing of violence just begets violence. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help anything. If you try to take out a whole culture, you're going to go down with it. It's not something that you can accomplish and survive. Even if you do live, you're going to be damaged by that.
I'd like to talk about the sound in this movie.
Yes,
there are some amazing sound cues and background music influences that come up from time to time, which are all homages to all sorts of different things.
Did you have any in mind?
Well, there was one right at the start that you pointed out, which is reminiscent of the.
When things start, when Hans calls in the soldiers and pretends that they're his daughters and says, adieu, and they shoot the floorboards. It sounds like the bombers coming overhead. And the warning sign, like the warning siren,
But even before that, we also had Fleur de Lis play in the...
Fleur-de-Lis.
Yeah, Fleur-de-Lis play. Fleur de Lis being the French national... Anyway. And there were...
look at me, I'm Scotty, I'm so cultured.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
There's... I'm pretty certain there's a Great Escape soundtrack. When they get...
At least it's reminiscent of it.
When they crack, what's his name? Why can't Hugo Stiglitz out of jail?
Yeah,
I'm pretty certain there's a Great Escape theme playing at that point.
Yeah, the drums.
And there are others all throughout the movie, from different movies here and there.
Yeah, like I was reminded a lot of The Sound of Music when in The Sound of Music when the Nazis try and catch up with the Von Trapp family. There's a very similar. Music cue when Shoshana's African French boyfriend goes into the back and sees the whole collection of film strips ready to be burned.
There was actually a nice shot as well because when the camera turns to the tapes on the ground, it also has the ammunition from in the background from the guns that have been shot out.
Very well timed. Very.
The spent casings, you mean?
Yeah, the spent casings.
I can't understand why anyone would just flat out hate Quentin Tarantino as a film.
They're jealous.
They have to be. They can't. There's no reason to hate him. Like his mastery of film language is incredibly palpable in almost all of his films.
That said, we have to talk about a few of the problems of the movie. There's not many, but it is 2.5 hours long, and the scene in the bar does go on forever.
You only say that because you left.
I went to the toilet because I needed the toilet. Bathroom. And I came back and the scene was still going, and then I needed the toilet again.
I'll tell you this, Scotty. I didn't feel like
no. It's a good scene.
I felt like you went in and out really quickly.
Okay.
It didn't feel like you were gone for that long.
Okay. Well, it felt like it was.
I hardly feel like this is Tarantino's fault.
No. But someone didn't go to the bathroom before we started watching the movie.
Eating stuff. Whatever. It is a 2.5 hour movie.
Yes, it is a 2.5 hour movie. And
That's
2.5 hours
before you start.
well spent.
Yeah.
Well spent. I feel like that
and going into the whole thing of enjoying violence, it also is like up to how aware the director is that he's allowing the audience to enjoy the violence. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like when we're introduced to the Nazi officer who holds the gun on Michael Fassbender under the table.
Yeah.
Like we want him to die.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one that wanted him to die, right?
No. You want him to die straight away.
Yeah.
Basically straight
away.
Because
he's a smarmy, sleazy...
Well, he's well cast as well.
Extremely well cast. Fantastic.
Oh, the whole movie is fantastically well cast.
But he's one of those characters that's like... He's like Hans Landa 2.0 if Hans Landa didn't have the charm.
Exactly.
And he wasn't as smart.
Yeah.
And that's what he is. Like, he's still really intelligent. Super
he has
intelligent.
the ego... But it's intelligent. It doesn't quite reach the ego. Like, still smart, but
And he's not scarily charismatic, which is something that Hans Landa is amazingly good at.
Yeah.
Like, there is a switch in that first scene when Hans is talking to the French farmer. And
the poker bluff. I like to call it the poker bluff.
Yeah.
He's just he's laying out his hands. Like, I've got this. What have you got?
Yeah.
And then
he's talking about how, the difference between the rat and the hawk. And then the conversation kind of slows down and he goes... You're hiding enemies of the state, are you not? And it's just straight direct to him, and it's just like, oh shit, bombs dropped, it's over, he knows, and it's insanely well done. And meanwhile, we get almost a different but similar scene in that bar where the guy finally figures out when Michael Fassbender holds up the 3 fingers instead of
the 2 fingers
instead
of the
of
thumb.
that.
Yeah.
And then the look on his face is just like, oh shit. Gotcha. But then he realizes that they're all going to die because he hasn't really thought this through very well.
See, if he was really Hans Landa 2.0, he would know that going in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't even started a conversation without knowing that.
And he would have known to have kept his mouth shut, and he would have just sat on that information and used it later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think Tarantino knew what Eli Roth was about to do to horror movies?
Like what, bashing them over the head with a baseball bat?
When he comes out as the bear Jew, I was like, this is what he's just doing to horror movies. It's like, take this, Hostel 1 and 2, take this, Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, I think, honestly, Inglorious Bastards has been Eli Roth's best work to date.
Yeah. But then he's not...
By a long...
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what's the other things in this?
But, I mean, he's still getting work, so it's...
Yeah. Can't argue with that.
Yeah. What else you got there, Scotty?
Oh, I've got so many stuff to talk about.
Keep going.
The comparisons between Aldo and Waltz. In the first scene, how Waltz, Hans Landa, interviews someone as opposed to how Brad Pitt's Aldo Rain interviews someone. Is
the German sergeant.
Yeah. It's quite deliberate.
Yeah.
In fact, there are quite a few deliberate... In fact, we're talking about the ending with the explosion of violence. Well, there's a lot of shots that are shot for shot from the propaganda movie to what's going on. In fact, there's a Wilhelm scream in the movie when someone falls out, and then when the explosion happens, someone falls out the window in almost the exact same way as well. There's so many parallels that are right on screen.
Mm. Well, going back to Aldo and Landa, they are basically mirror images of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Except Landa is very precise, very, intelligent, very smart, very charming, whereas Aldo is anything but any of those things. He just does not
Well, when we're first introduced to the Bastards,
chaotic.
It's like they are an American wet dream of what a soldier unit should be from that period.
Yes. At first.
Yeah.
But as we go through, the little we see of them, we realise how disorganised they really are.
Yeah.
They are literally just going in there blind.
Well, that's part of the American wet dream. It goes back to the West and the cowboys and.
But they lose. Well, they do. They lose everyone but 2 of their original group, but there's no mourning or anything over it. They're just like, they died, whatever.
And one of the 2 that survive is just out of luck more than anything else. So
it's incredibly callous.
Yeah,
but I feel deliberately so.
Yeah, it's not. Sometimes you see in movies like there's plot armor around certain characters.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there was plot armor around these characters. I feel like they just survived and they were just fortunate to get through what they got through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Aldo would have died as well if
he hadn't been captured
by
an opportunistic German security chief.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, keep going, Scotty.
Oh, what haven't we talked about?
You said you got heaps.
Yeah, but we've talked about it all. We just haven't talked about it in the right order. Oh, food. Laying the table. Let's talk about food.
Yeah, laying the table.
It's nice to look at.
But not only that, everything they do is an opportunity for the characters to be themselves.
Yeah.
So, like, when we see Hans in the cafe with Shoshana, and they order a strudel each, or he orders the strudel for her, everything in that scene he does to show that he has control.
Yeah.
So she tries to eat it before the cream shows up, and he says, no, wait for the cream.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wait for the cream. And he controls everything. But then, when the cream arrives, he says, well, after you.
Yeah.
You do the first thing first. And he gives permission for other characters to exist in his world.
Yeah, it's like with the pipe earlier in the first scene as
exactly.
well.
He says, well, that's the insane thing. Like, he's comfortable with allowing the French farmer to smoke his pipe because he's got an even bigger one.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't give a shit.
It's more elaborate, it's more German.
Like Sherlock Holmes style pipe.
Yeah.
Massive thing. A comically large one.
Well, that's the thing though. This setting the table, which happens in many scenes, is also in camera, and the way the camera does the conversation is also extremely important. We could probably talk about for half an hour about how the camera moves in the very first scene and how it's relevant to every single thing that's happening, every single motion.
From where the characters are moving in that scene and why they're moving in that direction and where they're coming from, and it's just fantastic.
It's the camera itself shows you when Hans Lander is 100% certain already that they are there, which is well before that he actually says it.
Yeah,
which is why I say it's a game of poker he's having at that stage.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. It's great.
Okay, I think we've discussed everything.
Great.
Cat People by David Bowie. It's a song.
Fantastic. Thanks for that input, Scotty.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's what you want to know. I'm tired. I want to eat more food. I want to have some apple strudel.
Mitch, how do you feel being on your first episode of the podcast?
Yeah.
No, it feels good. I feel like we've had a good conversation about stuff generally. It's good to have a conversation about how movies reflect our culture today. And
that's very true.
How our culture is reflected in the kind of movies that we make and that we watch.
And that we enjoy.
Yeah. No, if you ever want me on again, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Excellent.
We'll try and find an even bigger chunk of meat of history for you next time.
So Alexander the Great.
Yeah,
all right. Well, we will have a little bit of a break, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Welcome back to the studio.
Welcome back to reality. Oops, there goes
Gravity.
Oops, there goes.
Ad Astra.
No, Nazis.
Interstellar. But
Nazis. There goes the Nazis.
You said Gravity. That's a sci-fi film, so I started going off of other sci-fi films.
Okay, I don't know Eminem. That's all. That's
not
proved.
personally. I've never met the guy, so I don't know.
He talks faster than me, which is impressive. So
yeah, great.
Awkward silence.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I do trivia?
Yeah, jump into trivia.
Okay.
How are you gonna outdo yourself this time?
Okay, this person is an actor.
Really?
Has been a producer.
A producer.
A producer.
Wow.
Don't know if he's the original or not. Actually, not certain. Anyway, this person also appeared in Friends. As the boyfriend of a character, and in real life at that point in time. That's all I'm telling you.
What do you mean? You got to know that he's a director. Come on.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, guys, if you don't know who that is, then first of all, you need to go back and listen to a number of our podcasts.
Yeah.
And second of all, you need to get your head out of the hole you've been living in for the past 15 years. I'm going to say 15
because
he's
longer.
Well, it is longer, but the last 15 years has been where he's just been front and center of everything.
Okay.
As opposed to being a side character on Friends.
Yep. You guys can find us, as you know, as you probably found out because you're listening to the podcast. Anyway, Spotify,
yes.
SoundCloud,
yes.
Podbean,
yes,
iTunes,
yep.
and Facebook and YouTube.
Yep. And yeah, we're on YouTube again. So yeah.
Hey to our YouTube viewers. Hey,
all of you guys, or one of you.
3 or 4.
Oh, there's 3 or 4 of them now. Yeah, there you go. The future is YouTube.
Next week we are doing.
Well, we're doing Ad Astra.
Yes, we are doing
Ad Astra. The James Gray directed, Brad Pitt starring sci-fi emotional drama.
Emotional drama. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Psychological thriller.
Really? I wouldn't put it down to psychological thriller, but
psychological and sometimes thriller. So psychological.
Yes, I suppose.
Anyway, we will see you then.
Well, you'll hear us then.
Or you'll see us then because you are weird.
And you under our windows.
And under our floorboards.
Making sounds. Weird
that would explain
sounds.
a few things.
That would explain a few things. See you guys.
Bye.